Zambia was a one-party state, led by Kenneth Kaunda, one of Africa's more colourful leaders. His particular blend of Christianity and socialism did little to promote Zambia's image as a modern nation. In the early 1990s, Zambia introduced a multi-party system, but corruption remained rampant. In 2001, a new government was elected, committed to openness and good government. Zambia is now being portrayed as a model for other poor African countries. The government is arguing it should be in control of dispersing all international development aid. The days of individual donors funding individual projects should be a thing of the past. The government says it must take control of spending plans if it's to stand any chance of cutting poverty.
If you look at some of the East Asian countries and how they've managed to come out of the poverty that they've also found themselves in about the same time that Zambia was becoming independent, some of the factors that have helped them is this ownership question, is this idea that they own their own problems, they understand what is it that they need to do, and that when that aid come in, it's coming in behind a homegrown strategies, it's coming in behind ideas that people of the country itself feel would work for them. Aid works best when it's behind this ownership, when there is that commitment, when there is that capacity to be able to do what is it that it needs to grow an economy.
In the 1990s, aid funding for Zambia was badly coordinated. Donors failed to work together, there was no systematic approach, and the government had to deal with at least a dozen country donors separately. Plus, each individual donor had strict accountability requirements, which clogged up Zambia's civil service even more. In recent years, the system has become more streamlined, in the jargon, more harmonised. For example, in April 2004, 9 major donors, 8 European countries and the World Bank, signed an agreement to work as one group with the Zambian government.
We were getting too many missions of donors at the time. You know, I would be spending time as Minister of Finance just meeting mission after mission. A mission comes today from Sweden, SIDA. Tomorrow a mission comes from USAID. The day after a mission comes from JICA. 2 days later a mission comes from SIDA, Canada. And we said, look, our jobs is not basically to be meeting people. Our job is to deliver development to the people.
It's truly the case that in many of the poorest countries, the finance minister and the economy minister and many other parts of the government are just working round the clock, meeting this donor, this project, these terms, those terms, reporting, monitoring, preparing, and so forth, all often for very modest amounts of funding that actually never get dispersed in the end because the conditions become so complex, so contradictory, that they never actually materialize.
Also, the amount of aid Zambia has received over the years has yo-yoed up and down. In 1999, it was $623 million. In 2000, it went up to $795 million. But in 2002, it was back down, this time to $641 million. The volatility of aid flows made it difficult for the Zambian government to plan for the future. And that will make it harder for Zambia to achieve the internationally agreed Millennium Development Goal promises, the MDGs.
No employment in Zambia. No employment here.
No employment, yes,
Yeah.
no employment.
Yeah.
No employment in Zambia.
I think it's pretty much agreed how one could go about fixing this, and that's to let the poor countries themselves put out their strategy, make a national strategy based on the MDGs. And then you say to the donors, please help us finance that. Rather than having 22 or 25 or 28 donors all inventing their own projects that are inconsistent and not really directed at the shared goals that supposedly we're all acting together to achieve.
What we need here is a school. The nearest school is very far away.
We need seed here. We don't have any seed or fertilizer.
Zambia's fight against HIV/AIDS is a good example of how harmonisation is beginning to work. In 2003, the government had to complete no less than 27 different reports to donors on funding for projects tackling HIV/AIDS. The move now is to get one donor to look after almost all those projects. But the lack of coordination between donors is still a problem for many developing countries, especially those relying on aid.
I think there is real problems in terms of coordination between donors. And let me take the example of HIV and AIDS, where in some countries in sub-Saharan Africa, just in terms of funding for antiretroviral drugs, over 30 different donor missions per year often arrive in a developing country, wanting to see the minister, wanting to see the most senior officials in the Ministry of Health and often other departments, and placing as a result huge burdens on often what is a Ministry of Health with very little capacity to do the types of things that really are needed.
Is this an island in Zambia that they can't reach?
There's been a lot of discussion of pooling the funds so that there's only one set of donor reports to write, getting the timelines simultaneous, and above all, moving to multi-year commitments so that a country can safely embark on expanding its healthcare or education system, knowing that there's long-term funding in place. Simplifying and making it much more strategic is a huge challenge of donor efficiency and effectiveness.
In the 1990s, Zambia's economy was performing so badly, the World Bank and IMF insisted on tough changes. Zambia received loans only on condition the government made cuts in public spending and introduced a big privatization program. Now, with a more liberalized economy and a new government committed to transparency, donors have more confidence in working with the Zambian government. Aid strategies have become more coordinated, more harmonized. In education, as in HIV/AIDS, the drive now is to get one donor country to take responsibility for that whole area. In this respect, Zambia is taking something of a lead.
Zambia is one of the guinea pigs for harmonization at international level. Now, within what is happening in Zambia, we have signed memoranda of understanding with most of the donors. In fact, here we have now stopped talking about donors. We call them cooperating partners.
We can do much better if we all work together, and if we work together in a concerted effort. So here in Zambia, we're very pleased to be a model country for something that we refer to as simplification, harmonization, and alignment, which simply means that all of the partners, government, UN, donor partners, get together, decide what are the priorities. Government has to be in the leadership. Government is clearly in the driver's seat.
But despite harmonization and the advances made in cooperation, a quick look around shows Zambia is still overflowing with individual NGOs involved in local projects, independent from government and funded directly by international donors. This project near the capital Lusaka is a good example. 1 in every 4 children in Zambia is an orphan, and this local NGO focuses on helping just some of the hundreds of thousands orphaned by the AIDS pandemic. The project receives funding from a wide variety of international donors. None of the money goes through the government. Here, the children get a basic education in a community school, something now common across Zambia. They're funded by the community themselves with help from international donors. What worries NGOs like this is they could lose their influence over how the money is spent.
It should be the donors with the community. Yes, donors with the community. Let the money come direct to the community, because we are the people who are with these people, with the community here. We know their problems. The government rarely come and hear the problems of these people here. They not even visit them at all. Some of them don't even know there's a wafano which has got some of these children. They've never been here, you see. So I don't see there's a need for the donors to plan with them, but donors should call us with the community people and plan with us.
Zambia's single biggest donor is the European Union. In the last 5 years, it gave $448 million. But most EU aid, 70%, does not go to individual projects like Bofuano. It goes straight to the government as budget support. The EU argues it's the best use of the money.
Doing a nicely fenced project separately in a nice area, protected against risks and dangers from outside, might look successful, but in the long run it isn't. It is not sustainable. Bypassing the government is a solution that has been tried for many, many years by several donors, by several civil society organizations. That's true. But I think most efficient use of public money will be to increase performance of the economy as a whole.
While there is a move in Zambia for aid to go straight to the government, not all the major donors sign up to that idea. For example, the Americans and the Japanese. They still prefer to deal directly with individual projects.
At this stage, we are not for sure that is produce the most appropriate result in this country or in other African countries. Because we think that in order to do that, in the recipient government, they have to have a certain system to utilize those direct budget support effectively.
This school is being built with funds provided directly from the Japanese government. They pay for the project, they bring in a Japanese contractor, and they oversee the work.
One of the advantages of the donor money going straight to the project is that this money it is foolproof, because there won't be any loopholes of some people developing ideas of maybe trying to divert, because the owners, they are on the ground monitoring each and every cent.
For the Japanese, paying directly to a project, it's relatively easy to know exactly where their money is going. But for donors working with the government, where their money goes into the national coffers, does that necessarily mean they lose track of the money?
Pooling resources and accountability are both vital, and they're not in any way contradictory. So the donors pooling their resources means coordinating their efforts to support a national strategy. Accountability means no blank check. Quantify, set a timetable, put the numbers, the inputs, the outputs expected, so these can be monitored, verified, audited.
Certain donors prefer to go their own way. Sometimes it's because of political reasons, because donor or aid awareness in the country concerned is not very high, like in Japan or China or the US. Even the US, aid awareness is, until recently, was quite low, and that makes that those donors whose budget aid is much less present, that they tend to do things that are more cosmetical, that are more easy to sell to the general public.
Now, if I have the rest of the community under harmonization arrangement and only Japan and the United States are still standalone, at least I will be dealing with 3 missions. So I have done extremely well. Instead of having 14 meetings in a week, I will perhaps have 3 meetings in a week. We want to make sure that we spend less time on procedures. We want to deliver. And the time is now for everybody to buy into this program.
For many involved in local projects, the government seems remote and out of touch, and they fear losing the direct connection with donors will mean they lose their funding. But others in the NGO sector argue that funding individual projects endangers their longer-term viability.
I'm so glad you had the opportunity to visit Bofuano Project and to meet Mrs. Chola. She's one of our most active NGO partners and someone who's really making a difference. But she is indicative of many, many partners that we have who are outside of government in the NGO community, who see an immediate benefit when resources are channeled directly to them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, development is only as good as it is sustainable over the long term. If you do a project today and you accomplish it in 6 months, but then you go away and the project folds, you haven't really succeeded in doing very much.
Anybody who gives aid to somebody, they would like to have something which they say, do you know that? That building there, Mr. Maganda is occupying, I helped him build it. But we have said those are not the only things that is going to deliver Africa and Zambians from poverty.
The problem is, visible, easily identifiable projects tend to be short-term and do little for long-term development. Money goes to bricks and mortar and food and medicines. Ongoing commitments, such as salaries and administration, are a different matter. Even those who get their money direct from the donors agree this is a major problem.
The way that we perceive our work is that we can actually work in collaboration with government. There are times when government has recognized that they can't do everything and therefore have asked NGOs to come in and assist. And so it's that openness, I think, in the relationship that's fundamental. We can't do it on our own as civil society, and there are times when government can't do it on its own as well. And therefore we need to try and streamline a lot of what we're doing. This all needs to be coordinated, and the best placed entity to do that is really the government.
But Zambia's a big place, the size of Britain and France combined, and many remote communities don't receive any help at all. Most of the country's 11 million population live in rural areas, and over 60% live on under $1 a day. This village is typical. The locals say they get no help or support from either donors or the government.
We need seed. We don't have seeds here. We don't have fertilizer and anyone to teach us how to farm properly.
We've got a big healthcare problem. We need a clinic. People from here die on the way before reaching the nearest clinic.
People should visit us like you have. How come you've managed to get here when others haven't?
What this whole issue raises is the question about when aid should be handed over to the government. Do you wait until a country has proved itself? Or, especially in truly poor countries like Zambia, do you help immediately?
I found here in Africa that ownership is still, not good enough to sustain the economic development. But they have to think about by themselves, to support themselves. That's the first thing. Then, with that, in mind, they can utilize that, the outside assistance.
In general, I think it's wrong when donors say, you get your house in order, we'll wait, and when you do that, we'll come in and help you. That's almost always an impossible bit of advice, because impoverished governments need help along the way, even to get their house in order. If we just say no, we'll wait, then that's really an invitation to a downward spiral.
Really, let us not talk about waiting. In any case, if anybody wants to wait for a country and a government, countries never die. So you are going to wait in perpetuity. And whom are you going to help? You have to help the government of the day. If it shows willingness to be accountable, if it shows willingness to be transparent in its operations, if it can fight the ills of corruption, whether in the private sector or public sector, help them to do those things.
But the Zambian government faces huge constraints, currently beyond its control. Like many other African countries, it suffered a brain drain. Trained professionals leaving to find better wages abroad. Plus, HIV/AIDS has cut a swathe through Zambia's pool of expertise and talent.
One of the challenges that we face in countries like Zambia is the government has difficulty absorbing this role because so many people have been lost We've had a brain drain that's been ongoing in this region for decades now. We also have a terrible problem with HIV/AIDS, which has cost us many of our most talented professionals in Zambia. So the end result is that many government departments that should have 20 or 30 people working for them are down to 5 to 10 people. And it makes it very difficult for them to fill that coordination role. This is where the partners are called upon to do even more. The partners have to put themselves in a position where they provide the resources, technical, financial, to help strengthen government's capacity to guide the development process without taking it over. They have the lead. It is our job to get behind and push.
The lessons we've learned is that by us looking less at our flags, but looking only at the Zambian flag, you get better results. It's one, again, of those things we've learned. We have to trust these governments. We have to use more of their systems. And they themselves need to build systems that are transparent. Systems that their people feel that they are better served by, that allow us then to put more of our money through their own budgets, by governments owning their own agendas more, by us obviously being a little bit more tolerant, maybe than the way we've been in the past, by us now using more of the government's own systems rather than we bring in systems from outside, by us increasingly putting more money through the government's own budget when we have the confidence that that budget can deliver the goods on the ground. These are all part of the things that we're doing with governments to do to improve the aid business and the effectiveness of the aid that has been provided.
32 wheels, you know, those big trucks who came on market and those who were on the boats.
Is this new partnership between Zambia and the international community the start of a new future for the country? Is it a new and better model for cooperation between rich and poor nations?
I think it will take, some time. No quick fix, I think.
I'll be thinking of potholes. There are no more potholes. You drive from here up to Livingston. The road is one of the best in this part of the world. It is at least a very good road in Zambia. But 5 years ago, I know there were potholes. If we are going to think of these potholes, our minds will be confused. And I don't want people in Zambia to end up at our mental hospital because they are confusing their minds. Let's see the positive that has happened, build on it, and together we are going to build this country.